まで相手に書いております。
Is President of the African State.
Shukran.
Thank you. In the name of Allah.
So the Secretary General of the United Nations, African Union, Excellency Heads of State,
International Finance Corporation, Excellencies, Presidents, Prime Minister. It was the 4th of October in 1993 when Ticad 1 took place, and it was indeed a very different era, and an era in which Japan's engagement with Africa and African nations took a new turn. As we look back over this period, it is also remarkable to reflect that Ticad 7 occurs in a very different world. There was no African Union. There was no African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There was indeed a perception of Africa as being marginal to global GDP, and very often Africa's economy is largely viewed as sources of natural resources, essentially an extractive relationship with the continent. It was also an era where a key topic of Ticad 7, science, technology, and innovation, would not have been associated with African nations, entrepreneurs, pioneers, and scientists, today often being also at the forefront of some of these innovations. So as we gather here in Yokohama, and Prime Minister Abe, under your leadership and under the generosity also of the people of Japan, I think the agenda that is emerging, the relationship between a nation such as Japan and the member states of the African Union is indeed a very different one. As head of the United Nations Development Programme, this is also something that clearly influences every day our thinking. Thinking about the future of development has been the focus of UNDP for well over 50 years, and for many of your countries, that relationship with UNDP indeed takes us back 50 years. But as we look forward, I think it is a sense of excitement with which that engagement with Africa, and that also the theme of this Ticad 7 takes on a very different meaning. Integrated, innovative solutions are today springing up across the continent. President Kenyatta is here. I had the privilege of spending 10 years of my life watching development across the nation of Kenya, but also across the continent. Indeed, my development training is really one of a journey of learning through Africa's own experience. That very well-known platform called M-Pesa is often associated with digital technology, maybe with a technology innovation, but indeed what actually prompted the development of this remarkable experiment in financial inclusion was precisely the vision at the time of government, of the central bank governor, to allow something to happen that would allow financial inclusion to change the way the financial system in Kenya would work. And I could go on with many examples. Renewable energy was nowhere on the agenda in Ticad 1 times. Today in Africa, again from Kenya with the largest wind farm, solar power in Morocco, in Egypt, President Al-Sisi. I remember our discussions 4 or 5 years ago. Today, you are one of the leaders in terms of implementing renewable energy. The challenge of climate change and of biodiversity is often viewed as something that has a problem when we talk about Africa. It is very unfortunate that these perceptions continue. Few people across the world know that African nations are amongst the leading nations in the world who have actually dedicated their land and territory to the conservation of biodiversity at higher percentages than virtually most countries in most other parts of the world. This is the story of development in 2019, from technology to natural resources to governance to integrated development. So, as head of UNDP, as part of the Secretary General's reform of the UN development system, and also as a long-standing partner to Japan, and Japan's support to UNDP and through UNDP to many of your countries, it is a proud moment to see a different agenda emerging. It is, as the Secretary General said, the dawn of a new era for Japan, but it is also the dawn of a new agenda for the future of development, a different kind of partnership, a partnership that, as the chairperson of the African Union Commission just spoke to, that is defined by Agenda 2063 and within our United Nations family as the Agenda 2030 of Sustainable Development.
I would like to join others in thanking the government and the people of Japan and the city of Yokohama for their warm welcome. The World Bank is honored to be a co-organizer of the Ticad, and we welcome the theme of advancing Africa development through people, technology, and innovation. I would like to commend Prime Minister Abe for for his visionary leadership in focusing on the private sector since Ticad 5, and for increasing the involvement of Japanese and African private actors since Ticad 6. We are meeting today in challenging times, with rising trade barriers, a build-up of government debt in many developing economies, and deeper than expected slowdowns in several major economies. These challenges extend to African countries. Economic growth, especially in resource-intensive countries, has been slowing over the last years. Many sub-Saharan African countries have heavy public debt burdens, and climate change is already taking a toll. These are some of the difficulties the government of the continent must overcome. But there are also tremendous opportunities. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement will make the region the largest free trade area in the world. Africa, we all know it, is rich in natural resources of all sorts. Digital technologies offer an unprecedented opportunity for the continent to leapfrog the traditional development path. And last but not least, Africa youth is perhaps its greatest resource. Taking advantage of these opportunities will create jobs. And we need jobs. To keep pace with the growing population, the continent needs about 20 million new jobs every year. Moreover, over 40% of Africa, 1.3 billion people, are under the age of 15. To paraphrase President Akufo-Addo of Ghana, African countries must act to ensure that this population constitutes a demographic dividend and not a demographic liability. At the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali this past March, President Kagame summed up in one word what must change. And this word is mindset. All of us, governments, development partners, and the private sector must change the way we think about the public and private sectors in economic growth and job creation. We need a new approach between public and private sectors to unlock Africa's potential. We need government to ensure sound macroeconomic management, debt transparency, and sustainability. We need legal and regulatory frameworks that provide an attractive and level playing field for companies. We need governments to foster private sector investments in quality infrastructure. On the other hand, we need a private sector who sees more the great opportunity than the possible risk to do business in Africa. Together, the public and the private sector can literally ignite the continent's economy. At the World Bank Group, we are embracing this change of mindset. We are increasing our support to African governments to diversify their economies and implement pro-business reforms. We have developed a new approach called the Cascade, by which we pursue private sector solutions where possible so that scarce public resources can be used where they are most needed. In fact, if you think about it, the World Bank Group is a de-risking machine. We de-risk countries through World Bank policy-based loan and public sector projects, and we de-risk private sector investment and projects directly through IFC financing and MIGA guarantees. And since IDA 18, with the introduction of $2.5 billion of private sector window, we have new instruments to de-risk and catalyze private sector investment in the world's poorest countries. Now, talking about IDA, as you know, IDA is part of the World Bank Group that helps the world's poorest countries, and it is one of the largest sources of concessional finance for the continent. About 2/3 of IDA resources go to Africa. The 19th replenishment of IDA is scheduled to be concluded in December, we are aiming for an ambitious amount, building on a successful meeting hosted by the Ethiopian government in Addis Ababa 2 months ago. I would like to call you for your support in achieving this goal. In closing, Ticad has a tradition of promoting important issues. Ticad 6 in Nairobi was instrumental in raising the profile of universal health coverage for Africa. We hope that Ticad 7 will help strengthen the partnership between the public sector and the private sector to accelerate Africa's development.
Our hope is that Ticad 7 will come up with innovative solutions in order to have large-scale training of our youth in these areas. The development perspective has speeded up by Africa. The heads of state have decided within the framework of its institutional reform to transform NEPAD into an executing agency of the African Union, and this agency will be accredited to execute the various programs and projects that will be adopted in the Yokohama Plan of Action 2019. In parallel to the institutional reform, the African Union has continued pursued its efforts in order to integrate the continent as well as the regions. The launching in July 2019 in Niamey, Niger, of the African Continental Free Trade Area is called upon to ask for a frank support of Ticad 7 in order to ensure the success of the Continental Free Trade Area. Despite all these and all the difficulties and conflicts that are there, the resurgence of Ebola across the continent, which has forced even the World Health Organization to declare World Health Emergency. In fact, the issues that are there, that whether intellectual and find solutions to these conflicts. The signing on 6 August of the peace agreement in Mozambique with Renamo is itself to be commended. This is a proof of that African problems can best be treated and dealt with by Africans themselves, and silencing the guns by 2020 is the theme of our next summit. The African Union has in fact placed itself in the operational trajectory of implementing all the programs and projects that are continental programs and projects, and also to meet the demands of the peoples of Africa. We are aware of the exceptional need for mobilizing financial resources, better economic governance, and a more effective fight against corruption and tax evasion. In fact, industrialization with infrastructure that are needed, and as President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the chairman of the African Union, has stressed in order to increase the competitiveness of African enterprises and industries at the continental level. It is here that we should appeal for a plan of action for the industrial development and the development of infrastructures that is within the framework of the partnership between Africa and Japan. And I just want to have an appeal to make to the Japanese investors. The strong representation and in large numbers of the private sector of Japan at Ticad 16 held in Nairobi in 2016 has given rise to great hopes through the African continent. It is hoped that this will not be dashed, and it is urgent to promote these strategies in Africa to take advantage of the situation and to take into account the SMEs and the SMIs of Africa, and to make sure that we give great attention in order to improve the business climate within its member states. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just attended this G7 summit in Biarritz, and together with the heads of state, I've conveyed the message of Africa that there is urgent need to close our ranks in order to ensure the emergence of a new multilateralism, because there is no hope for mankind if we neglect or sideline the African continent. The seventh Ticad is called upon in this very land of Japan and this beautiful city of Yokohama, which is close to our hearts. We want our partners to work together with the Africans so that we can succeed and to have the Africa that we want.
Japan for its commitment to Africa as exemplified by Ticad. Since its launch 26 years ago, Ticad has evolved into an open, inclusive and multilateral forum for mobilizing and sustaining international support for Africa's peace, security and sustainable development. I see Africa as a dynamic continent of opportunity where winds of hope are blowing ever stronger. And Ticad has played a critical role in focusing international dialogue on Africa, built on the twin principles of African ownership and international partnership. Its partnerships have made important contribution to Africa's economic transformation through entrepreneurship and trade. And they have supported increased access to health services, education, water and sanitation, and helped promote peace and stability. The theme of Ticad 7, Advancing Africa's Development Through People, Technology and Innovation, is timely. Technology and innovation are central to unleashing Africa's vast potential and realizing our shared vision of leaving no one behind. Since Ticad 6, African nations have made significant progress in the areas of sustaining growth, strengthening governance, promoting health and education, addressing conflict, promoting gender equality, and accelerating regional cooperation and integration. The launch of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in July at the African Union Summit in Niger is a particularly important milestone. This can open up vast opportunities for trade and investment. Realizing the potential of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement will require investment in regional infrastructure and infrastructure to connect African countries by land, sea and air and through telecommunications in the digital era. These will reduce costs of doing business and improve the continent's competitiveness. Investing and improving education is another key to unlocking Africa's potential. Much more work is needed in this area to expand access to education and to enhance its quality. We must equip people of all ages for work in the 21st century. A lack of sufficient investment in education in science, technology, engineering and mathematics can hold back Africa's growth and deprive its youth of opportunity. Ticad 7 may provide tremendous impetus to help Africa harness the power of technology and innovation for its sustainable development. It is imperative that we work together to close the digital divide and take profit of the technological advances to enable African nations and economies to prosper. Excellencies, Africa's sustainable future also hinges on our collective efforts to address the growing climate emergency. African countries are already bearing the brunt. Africa gives a minimal contribution to climate change, but it is in the first line suffering its dramatic consequences. And we have only a narrow window of time to take bold and decisive action. That is why I'm convening a Climate Action Summit in New York on the 21st of September, where I'm asking leaders from governments, businesses and civil society to come with ambitious announcements that will help us rise to this existential challenge. Finally, realizing Africa's potential also hinges on peace and stability. While long-term prospects for the continent are promising, armed conflicts and violent extremism are a significant obstacle to continent-wide sustainable development. The issues are complex, but we must pay particular attention to the links between peace and security, development, good governance, inclusion, and building resilience to climate change. Africa needs peace for its development. And I call for enhanced partnerships in support of the African Union Silencing the Guns initiative. And I thank Japan for its generous support to the Triangular Partnership Project since 2015 through funding and the provision of trainers. So far, 330 uniformed engineers and 2,700 uniformed signals personnel have have been trained and deployed to field missions, including the African Union mission in Somalia. Ladies and gentlemen, from day one as Secretary General, I've been determined to forge ever closer ties between the United Nations and Africa, and in particular, the African Union. And I'm pleased to say that there has been a quantum leap in our strategic cooperation with the African Union. We are today much better positioned to address shared challenges. Our two organizations are working closely together, not only on peace and security, but also on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union Agenda 2063 are complementary and mutually supportive. And I welcome the Ticad 7 Yokohama Declaration and its implementation as a vital way of scaling up partnerships for peace and sustainable development in line with those two agendas.
Ticad 6 reports to submit them to this.
右手の秘書官たちの隣にいる仲間さん、どうぞ外まで上げてみたいと思います。